One metric to rule them all. One metric to find them. One metric to bring them all and in the darkness bind them. Executives love a dashboard. The fewer the metrics that are on the dashboard, the more clarity they think they have. And imagine a dashboard with one metric. The one metric to rule them all. With one metric, there's no need for interpretation. Executives would be in full control. And as Siegel's law states, a person with one watch always knows what time it is, but a person with two is never sure. But this is business. This is not Mordor. There is no magic metric, but we may be heading to the peak of Mount Doom. What Siegel neglected to include in his law was that a broken watch is right twice a day. So the person with one watch maybe knows what time it is occasionally. Also, time is not causal. Sure, time and the first cocktail are strongly correlated, and if you strictly follow the rules, a causal relationship will follow. However, as soon as somebody says, well, it must be 5 o'clock somewhere, causality pours away. What am I talking about? I'm talking about Net Promoter Score, or NPS. And despite what you may have heard, NPS is not the one metric to rule them all. Because while it will bind your executive team, it's going to just leave them in the dark. Let's skip to the point. We've all been exposed to NPS, but let's make sure that we're on the same page. Net Promoter Score is built on a single likelihood to recommend metric or question. The answer is a score from 0 to 10. People who give 9 and 10, they're promoters. 7 and 8s are passives. And anybody gives you a 0 to 6, they're a detractor. And NPS is then calculated by taking the percent of promoters and subtracting the percent of detractors. And so it's going to range from negative 100 to 100. And it's easy to see why it took off. Customer sentiment is really messy, and this compresses it down into one easy to understand metric. It's easy to benchmark internally, against your competitors, and across your industry. And that promoter versus detractor creates kind of a moral narrative of fans versus haters. All that feels quite actionable. And it certainly didn't hurt that early academic papers on NPS promoted it as a predictor of company growth. But Net Promoter Score gives executives false readings. Sure, that one score hides a lot of mess and noise, but that is useful information that you're hiding in that mess, in that noise. NPS is scored from 0 to 10, so that is 11 data points being squashed down into one score. Detractors are anybody who scores from a 0 to 6. So a 1 is the same as a 5. Similarly, a 6 is not that different from a 7 numerically or in the eyes of your customer, but in NPS maths, the difference is a lot bigger than 1. It's the difference between being a detractor and being meh. Now, as I mentioned earlier, NPS is really easy to benchmark. If I've not said this before, I'm not a big fan of most benchmarking. In a lot of ways, benchmarking is kind of like NPS. A lot of useful information gets lost in the aggregation of the data. And a firm's NPS score is very dependent on their vertical, the market, where they sit in the market, their ICP, and the list goes on and on and on. To get a sensible benchmark, you'd have to match each of those variables as close as possible. Otherwise, you end up looking at an average of averages. That's not using comparison as a tool, it's using it for a trophy. Another thing that can lead to bad decisions are cultural differences. Now, I've lived in the UK for more than 26 years, and I will admit I'm still fuzzy on cultural references from before the year 2000. But I feel qualified to say that the British will never give a 10, and a 9 isn't very likely either. Now, the good news is they're unlikely to give 0s and 1s. This is not a dig. Keep calm and carry on means nothing is ever awesome, nor is it so bad that a cup of tea won't fix it. That's what makes the British, British. It does, however, make NPS tricky. Sure, you could adjust the methodology for each local market, but what this really highlights is that it's the messy that matters. Executives see changes in NPS indicating changes in their business fortunes. If NPS goes up, executives see this as customers are becoming more loyal. It naturally tracks that if customer loyalty is on the rise, then increased revenues cannot be far behind. Net Promoter Score can correlate to revenue growth. Of course, so can the number of days staff spend in the office. So let's all go back to 5 days a week, shall we? In the United States, there is a strong correlation between ice cream sales and the number of murders. Now, things are pretty weird in the US, but it's not like all Americans are lactose intolerant. Ice cream does not put Americans into a maniacal frenzy. Ice cream is sold more when the outside temperature goes up. Similarly, murders increase when the outside temperature increases because frayed tempers and more people being outside. The cause of both the increase in ice cream sales and the increase in murders is the outside temperature. Another issue with Net Promoter Score is that intention is not behavior. Anybody who's ever had a teenager knows this all too well. They genuinely intended to take out the trash, and yet it is you, in your pajamas, outside in the dark at 6 a.m, putting out your bins in the rain. It's not their fault. Their brains are not fully wired yet. So just having customers say they're willing to recommend your business will not lead to actual referrals. Let me be clear. Net Promoter Score is not bad. It is the hammer being used to screw in a shelf, the right tool being used for the wrong job. NPS will not predict repeat purchases, new customer acquisition, or revenue growth, but it is a great diagnostic tool. It was never meant to be the KPI, it was always meant to be the signal. And NPS is not just a single likelihood to recommend question. It should be a process paired with a follow-up why question. And this should start in the survey itself, but the why should also be asked person to person. Now, executives like NPS because it simplifies the noise into a single number. The problems, however, lie in the noise. The successes are hiding in the noise as well. The executives need to get into the noise. Net Promoter Score should be your smoke alarm. Sure, the smoke alarm goes off when you're properly cooking a steak, but it also alerts you when a faulty socket has sparked an electrical fire. So I'd love to hear your NPS stories. Feel free to DM me or like and leave a comment below. Encouragement, advice, and topic ideas are always welcome. And if you like this episode, follow and share. Join me next time when I'll cut through more B2B buzzword BS. Until then, stay safe, make good choices, and keep skipping to the point.